What's going on YouTube? My name is Zach with Android Digest, and today we're going to be reviewing the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. And this phone, it's very interesting because if you look out there at the prepaid market, you might see that this phone has been going on sale for very, very low prices. This phone has a 120Hz screen, and you might find this phone for free. You might find this phone for $100 or $200 at a lot of prepaid carriers. I've also seen this phone go on sale at Best Buy, the unlocked version, for like $250, and sometimes even a little bit below that. So when we look at that market and we look at the holidays, a lot of you might be wondering if you should pick this phone up. So with all that being said, let's talk about it and let's review the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. So this phone, it's a phone that's very interesting. It makes a lot of compromises. Some compromises seem very, very large, and honestly, maybe those compromises aren't large at all to you. So we're going to talk about some of those compromises, and some of those, of course, are in the design of this phone. And personally, I don't think that's a big deal. We see a plastic back, of course. Again, not a big deal to most people. Just put a case on the phone. Of course, you will get a lot of fingerprints on the back if you're not careful, but that's not going to matter, again, if you have a case. If you look at the front of the phone, you are going to see some bezels, a little bit of a dated design. You're going to see a little teardrop at the top. I don't really care about seeing bezels that are this big on the top and the bottom. I don't think that's really a big deal to most people. So hey, no big deal there, right? But you will see some things that you're going to be really impressed by, because this has a headphone jack, which you can't find in a lot of higher end phones. This does have an SD card slot, which you can't find in a lot of high end phones. And this also has a dual SIM card slot, at least in the model that I have, and that may vary by region, but the fact that you get two SIM card slots, at least in the model from Best Buy, again, that's very, very impressive. So I think the compromises they made with the design, in a lot of ways, those are really made up for by the extra stuff they're giving you. And when we look at the screen, I think it's the same thing. Yes, there are some compromises because we do get an LCD screen, but that's pretty typical around this price point anyway, honestly. Even around $200 and $300, LCD screens are pretty normal. But we do get a 120Hz screen. And I'm very impressed by that, because if you look at someone like Apple, if you look at the iPhone 14 for like $800, they don't have that 120Hz screen. If we look at Google even, they aren't even giving a 120Hz screen to the Google Pixel 6 or to the Google Pixel 6a that you could find for $450 or a little less when it's on sale. But the point is, we see Samsung, who is a huge phone maker, and I really am impressed that they aren't holding back on some of these features. A lot of companies like Apple, they don't want to cut into their higher end phone sales. So the fact that Samsung is still giving us some really nice features at this price, again, very impressed with it. And if you don't really care about refresh rate, that's fine, but it will make everything feel a lot smoother as you are scrolling around in the phone, because the screen is refreshing a little bit faster. Now this screen does have a 6.6-inch screen, 2408 by a 1080 resolution, so a good resolution on it. It does look very nice when I'm watching content, when I'm watching movies. It's not mini LED, it's not OLED or AMOLED, so that is one minor disappointment, one minor compromise. But at this price point, I think this screen is very, very good. In fact, I would say it's better than a lot of competitors around this price. Now, if we look at other things like performance, that's one area that this phone might lag behind. Not necessarily against its competitors. In fact, I'm very, very impressed with the performance on this phone overall for the price. But if you do compare it to some higher end flagships, you will notice a little bit of lag, of course, especially if you are a phone snob. Remember, this is a budget phone. So it does have that mid-range processor. It's a Snapdragon 695 5G. And overall, it's going to give you fairly good performance. When you're scrolling around the UI, you're not going to see a lot of hiccups. That 120Hz screen is really going to be paying off in really big ways. And everything is going to feel buttery smooth. Overall, when you're going between apps, when you're just scrolling around the news, even when you do some gaming, this will not be a high-end gaming machine, but this can do some mid-range gaming. I was able to play some Call of Duty on it. The graphics were actually pretty decent. I was expecting a little bit worse, but I did get pretty good graphics out of it, and the performance with gaming was pretty good, and that 120Hz screen does really help with that. So hey, I'm really impressed with the performance overall. Just remember to keep your expectations in check. If you find this for $300 or lower, the performance is going to be great. It's going to be very good for the money, but it won't be quite as good as something like a Google Tensor processor, and it won't be quite as good as some of those higher end flagship processors from Snapdragon. Now, outside of performance, if we look at other things on this phone, like the battery life, the battery is super good on this phone. We're talking a 5,000 milliamp battery. That is crazy good. That is better than almost any phone out there on the Android side, and the processor is very power efficient. So you should get really good screen on time with this phone, like 7 to 10 hours. A lot of you, I know screen on time isn't the best way to measure battery life, by the way, but if you're looking at your average consumer, some of you might even be able to pull out 2 days on this phone. You might get a day and a half, and if you're a power user, you should still make it through an entire day on this phone. So I'm very impressed with that battery life. It's really, really good, especially for the money. And again, extra features when we talk about other things. It does have a headphone jack. The fingerprint sensor is in the power button, and it does okay. It does lag a little bit on occasion, but I did find the fingerprint sensor to be very good. Personally, I like fingerprint sensors in power buttons. I prefer them over the in-screen fingerprint readers, so it wasn't a big deal to have it there. Again, it does lag a little bit behind depending on what you're doing. If you have to wake up the phone all the way from sleep, it might take a little bit of time, but overall, I still think it's okay. And if we look at the cameras, I need to talk about the cameras. The cameras are not great. This would not be the reason to buy this phone. I think it's okay for the price point. This is not going to compete though with the Google Pixel 6a or the Google Pixel 7 or the Google Pixel 6 or any of those phones, right? And if you buy a flagship phone, by the way, if you buy it used, I'm sure you could get a little bit of better cameras for the money. But if you look at this camera, it will be pretty good overall, again, compared to a lot of other phones, at least compared to other phones in that prepaid sector, under $300, under $200. I think these cameras will be okay. Now, it is a 50 megapixel camera on this phone, so that's a pretty high megapixel count, but remember, that's not the whole story as far as pictures. This phone takes okay pictures. There is a little bit of shutter lag when I take a picture. If I take a picture of a moving object, for example, you don't get the best pictures in the world, but outside of that, you are still going to get a very good experience with the camera, at least compared to other competitors again. Now, I wouldn't expect a lot from the extra cameras. You do have a 5 megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth camera. When you look at those things, I wouldn't expect a lot. Honestly, I think they are just looking at other competitors. A lot of them just stack as many cameras as they can so they look better, but realistically, you're not going to get great quality out of all of those. I would recommend just using the main camera for most of your shots. And if you look at the video quality, the video quality is okay as well. It's just 1080p. You don't get 4K, you don't get anything like that. But again, it does okay for the money. It's not great, but it's not absolutely terrible. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about, which may be a huge deal. This may be a deal breaker for a lot of you. Personally, for me, this is a deal breaker, but for you, it might be no big deal. But this phone does not have an actual proximity sensor. It's a virtual proximity sensor, and this has really been a trend on a lot of Samsung smartphones. They've been doing this to cut costs on smaller, lower-end phones or budget phones, and realistically, I just absolutely hate this. I don't know why I said realistically, but the point is I do not like it. If you put this phone up to your face, it's supposed to go black, right? It's supposed to recognize that your face is on the phone, and when it recognizes that, hey, we might not want you pressing a bunch of buttons with your face, right? That's a bad idea. So there's normally a physical sensor that's supposed to detect that, but Samsung has used software to try to make that happen. So they try to recognize when you move your phone really fast to your face, it tries to recognize, oh, I need to make sure the phone goes black. It tries to use other parts in the phone, right, to make sure that the phone goes black. But there are occasions where the phone will not go black when it's on your face. Maybe if you're walking around a lot, you might notice it. Maybe if you're doing something like moving around a lot when you're on the phone, it might not go black on occasion. Now, most of the time, it's going to work just fine. Whenever I did put it up to my face, and when I did go back and forth, it did seem to do a pretty good job. But just keep in mind, there will be some rare occasions where the phone might wake up on its own, where you might accidentally hang up on someone. I don't expect it to be very often, but there might be some occasions when you're walking around or when you have a lot of heavy movement where it might think that you're actually off the phone, but you're not. Or it might think you're putting the phone down to put it on speakerphone, and you might not be. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. That might be a deal breaker for some of you. However, it won't be a huge occurrence all the time. It won't really matter if you're on speakerphone. And a lot of you, again, aren't going to see this on your day-to-day experiences. It might just be one thing that happens once a week or once every few weeks. If I look at everything and I look at the total package of what this phone has to offer, is this a phone worth buying? I would absolutely say yes, especially if you find this phone on sale. Keep in mind that a lot of prepaid carriers, again, they are dropping the price on this phone. This is one of those phones that's going to be on sale at places like Cricket and a lot of prepaid carriers. I'm sure Metro will have this phone on sale. A lot of prepaid carriers are going to see this Samsung phone and they are going to drop the price. They might offer it for free if you switch over to that carrier. And even if you're not doing any of that, if you go to Best Buy and you look at this phone, if you compare it to a lot of competitors around $300, this is still going to be a really good phone. But if you find this phone on sale, it will be a terrific bargain. Now, in my opinion, with all the holiday sales, one of the best bargains out there is going to be the Google Pixel 6a. I think that phone is terrific. In fact, that's a phone that I have right here. I have a nice little case on it here, but this is a terrific phone that they put on sale for Black Friday for like $299. If you see the Google Pixel 6a for $299 and this phone is $299, I would recommend the Pixel 6a a little bit more. The cameras are going to be a little better. You're not going to get a 120 hertz screen, but you will get a little bit of a nicer screen, a little bit of better quality on it. And overall, I just think the Google experience will be a little bit better. However, if you're looking at finding this phone for $200, or maybe you find this Galaxy phone for $150, or you find it on sale at a lot of prepaid carriers, or maybe you're watching this and it's not Black Friday anymore, and maybe the Pixel 6a is back up to $400, or it's back up to $350, that will make this decision a little bit easier for you. This is a great phone for those bargain hunters. If you want a 120 hertz screen, if you want a phone with fairly good performance, if you want a phone with a headphone jack, if you want a phone with an SD card slot, those are things that you can't get from the Google Pixel line. So overall, I would say this is definitely a great budget phone. It's a phone I would recommend, as long as you could deal with those minor compromises, right? You get average speakers, you don't get an OLED or mini LED screen, and you also have to factor in that, well, that proximity sensor is a really big deal to some of you. But outside of those things, those are really minor to a lot of you. It's something not a lot of you will notice. And when you look at this phone, and when you compare it to the market and all the other phones out there, I would definitely say that this phone is worth buying. This phone has so many great specs for the price, and with all the sales you're going to see on this phone, I would highly recommend considering it. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please give me a like and give me a sub. That would help my channel. And another thing you could do if you get a little bit of time is watch some other videos. That would definitely help to support me as well. And by the way, use those links in the description if you want to buy this. That does help to support my channel. So have a great day. Thank you so much and enjoy your crazy, crazy week in this crazy, crazy world.